The film opens with the tale in a penitentiary, where Doksa and Dae-ho, the boss of two mob factions, are incarcerated. Brawls are inevitable daily occurrences, to the extent that guards resort to water cannons to disperse them. This situation compels the chief warden to contemplate how to establish tranquility in the facility, as he's currently under a promotion assessment. The head of the security division, Mr. Lee, pledges to mediate between Doksa and Dae-ho to foster reconciliation. Doksa himself is presently bathing, with the other prisoners queuing behind him. At the front of the line, Dae-ho plots to swiftly eliminate Doksa. Unfortunately, Dae-ho's scheme is thwarted as he's apprehended by one of the guards delegated by Mr. Lee. The following day, the chief warden informs Mr. Lee that he must brace for the arrival of a new inmate, the most dreaded mob boss in Korea. The chief warden anticipates that things might escalate further. Nevertheless, Mr. Lee argues contrarily. If there exists someone mightier than Doksa and Dae-ho, a single leader will reign supreme, potentially resolving the prolonged unrest. One afternoon, when the prisoners assemble in the yard, Doksa challenges Dae-ho to a brawl. Doksa discerns that Dae-ho intends to dispatch him surreptitiously. Dae-ho accepts the challenge, and they adjourn to the edge of the yard, where inmates often engage in combat. The clash between the two mob factions erupts. The confrontation commences with their underlings dueling one-on-one. Meanwhile, the guards appear content, finding amusement in watching the inmates' clashes. After the men from each side fight, it's their gang leader's turn to engage in solo combat. Doksa and Dae-ho possess comparable fighting prowess, prolonging their confrontation. Eventually, their subordinates join the fray to defend their leaders, prompting the guards to intervene. As a consequence of the skirmish, Doksa and Dae-ho are summoned by Mr. Lee to his office, where he endeavors to broker peace. However, their enmity proves arduous to reconcile, and they're reluctant to heed Mr. Lee's counsel. The following day, Lee Tae-sik, the inmate whom the warden frets over, arrives at the penitentiary. Accompanied by two guards, Tae-sik traverses the yard, where the inmates are congregated. The inmates appear apprehensive and awestruck upon seeing Tae-sik, as they're already familiar with his reputation. Nonetheless, Doksa provocatively taunts Tae-sik. In response, Tae-sik solicits the escorting guard's permission to teach Doksa a lesson. Doksa collapses after a single blow. In the afternoon, Tae-sik, confined alone in a specialized cell, is visited by the chief warden and Mr. Lee. The warden implores Tae-sik to assist in managing Doksa and Dae-ho, perennial troublemakers in the prison. If Tae-sik succeeds in reconciling them, the warden vows to support him during his incarceration. Following the discussion, the warden even presents Tae-sik with a fruit basket. In Doksa's cell, his cohorts endeavor to rouse him from unconsciousness. Meanwhile, in another cell, Dae-ho converses with his cohorts about Tae-sik, a legendary figure in the Korean underworld. Tae-sik used to work only as a security guard, until one day he accidentally encountered a group of mobsters in order to protect a woman. The incident makes him have to fight against 100 of them. Amazingly, Tae-sik's able to defeat the 100 mobsters alone. And since then, Tae-sik's popularity skyrocketed until he became the #1 mafia in Korea. Back in the prison, during the afternoon, Tae-sik, who's sitting alone in the field, is met by the inmates who salute him, including Doksa and Dae-ho. Then Tae-sik calls Doksa and Dae-ho so they can reconcile. Unexpectedly, Dae-ho extends a hand to Doksa, signaling his desire for peace. Doksa accepts Dae-ho's gesture, and they exchange apologies. Observing them from his office, the warden appears gratified, finally able to work without apprehension. The inmates' routine seems to transform. They collaborate to assist each other, even displaying camaraderie during their yard gatherings. Tae-sik is subsequently assigned as a regular inmate and transferred to Dae-ho's cell. Time elapses, and the chief warden is reassigned due to a promotion. Remarkably, the prison he oversees garners acclaim as a model correctional facility. To commemorate this accolade and bid farewell to the departing chief warden, an entertainment extravaganza featuring a musical ensemble is staged within the prison. Several days later, Jo Pye-young-ho assumed the role of chief warden. Mr. Lee briefs him on the prison's profile, highlighting the tranquility that has prevailed since Tae-sik's arrival. Consequently, the prison guards heavily rely on Tae-sik to uphold order. Infuriated by the notion of a mafia figure being pivotal to the prison's stability, Pye-young-ho lashes out at Mr. Lee with a golf club. Henceforth, Mr. Lee conducts inmate inspections with a tense countenance. One afternoon, Mr. Lee gathers all the inmates for an inspection. However, one prisoner is spotted idling. provoking Mr. Lee's ire as he subjects him to repeated blows. The other inmates, witnessing Mr. Lee's transformation, remain silent. Tae-sik also encourages Doksa and Dae-ho to comply with Mr. Lee's directives. While the inmates are engaged in external labor to clean the prison premises, Pyeong-ho, accompanied by several guards, scrutinizes the inmates' possessions. To their surprise, the guards discover an abundance of contraband, including cigarettes, knives, and drugs. Consequently, the prison regulations are tightened. Inmates are restricted to 30-second showers and their food rations are reduced. As Pyeong-ho inspects the area and stands before Tae-sik's cell, Tae-sik reminisces about the incident that led to his imprisonment. At that time, several youths were reveling at a karaoke establishment accompanied by girls provided by the venue. One of the youths spiked a drink with illegal drugs and coerced Ho-ran, his companion, to consume it. When Ho-ran refused, the youth stuck her with a bottle. Seeing the commotion unfolding, the pimp storms into the room and summons the guards. Tae-sik, the proprietor of the karaoke bar, also enters and tries to pacify the drunken young man. However, the young man grabs the broken bottle and menaces Tae-sik. Tragically, the young man loses control, slips, and is fatally wounded by the bottle. Following this incident, Tae-sik marries Ho-ran. Despite his innocence, Tae-sik is still sentenced to 5 years in prison. The young man turns out to be the son of Pyeong-ho. Driven by a grudge, Pyeong-ho schemed to be transferred to the prison where Tae-sik is incarcerated. Besides seeking to torment Tae-sik, he also plans to frame Tae-sik, aiming to extend his sentence to life imprisonment. Pyeong-ho instructs 2 guards to remain and beat Tae-sik, initiating his torment. Mr. Lee feels coerced into cooperating with Pyeong-ho but has no choice but to comply. Unexpectedly, Pyeong-ho orders Doksa and Dae-ho to be returned to their cells and instructs Mr. Lee to maintain the animosity between them, aiming to preserve the prison's tense atmosphere. One inmate is brought to Mr. Lee's office and severely beaten to falsely implicate Tae-sik as the prison's drug supplier. One day, Ho-ran visits the prison. Mr. Lee escorts her to Pyeong-ho's office, where Pyeong-ho falsely praises Tae-sik as an exemplary prisoner, allowing Ho-ran the privilege of meeting her husband in the chief warden's office. Unaware of Pyeong-ho's identity, Ho-ran trusts him. She drinks coffee laced with sleeping pills and soon falls asleep. Pyeong-ho immediately photographs her unconscious body. Subsequently, Tae-sik is escorted to Pyeong-ho's office by several guards. Enraged at seeing his wife harassed, Tae-sik is helpless as he's handcuffed. He faints after being struck by Mr. Lee. A few days later, Pyeong-ho summons Doksa to his office. Pyeong-ho offers him parole in exchange for taking Ho-ran hostage and recapturing Tae-sik if he tries to escape. Doksa agrees, longing to care for his ill mother. The next day, with the help of his fellow inmates, Tae-sik subdues a guard in his special cell. Disguised in a warden's uniform, Tae-sik escapes. In the yard, Tae-sik gathers Dae-ho and his men, asking for their help to confront Pyeong-ho. However, they refuse, suspecting foul play, especially since Doksa was abruptly paroled by Pyeong-ho. Realizing Ho-ran is in danger, Tae-sik asks Dae-ho's men to create a diversion, facilitating his escape. As commotion ensues and Tae-sik can easily walk towards the exit, when Tae-sik opens the prison door, Mr. Lee sees it, but he lets it go. He actually looks happy to see Tae-sik manage to escape from prison. Then Mr. Lee reports Tae-sik's escape to Pyeong-ho. Unexpectedly, Pyeong-ho looks calm because he's predicted that this would happen. He then asks Mr. Lee to prepare himself because in 2 hours, the Minister of Law will come to visit the prison. Mr. Lee immediately inspects the prisoners as well as the guards and asks them to act as if nothing has happened. Outside, Tae-sik searches for Ho-ran and encounters some of Doksa's men. He quickly overpowers them and finds Ho-ran held by Doksa. Despite Doksa deploying his best fighters, Tae-sik defeats them all. When Tae-sik is momentarily off guard, Doksa stabs him. Tae-sik overpowers Doksa before escaping with Ho-ran. They hide inside an empty house, and Tae-sik urges Ho-ran to report his prison break to ensure their safety from Doksa and his men. Tae-sik pursues Doksa while Ho-ran heads to the police station. Tae-sik and Doksa clash again, with Doksa wielding a knife. Despite his severe injury, Tae-sik fends off Doksa's attacks. Both eventually collapse from their wounds. Doksa confesses to being manipulated by Pyeong-ho, but vows to ruin Pyeong-ho's career and expose his corruption. He calls his reporter friend and hands the phone to Tae-sik to reveal the truth about the prison. Back at the prison, the Minister of Law is interrupted by reports asking about Tae-sik's escape and Pyung-ho's fabricated evidence. Unprepared for the onslaught, Pyung-ho orders Mr. Lee to remove the reporters, but the minister has heard enough. He orders an investigation of the prison's CCTV footage and Pyung-ho's phone. Discovering the photo of Ho-ran's harassment, the minister immediately orders Pyung-ho's arrest. Meanwhile, outside the prison, guards find Doksa and Tae-sik and take them back inside. The film concludes with the prison returning to its calm state. Doksa and Dae-ho reconcile, and Tae-sik is seen leading the inmates. Mr. Lee is promoted to chief warden, signifying a hopeful new chapter for the prison. The film ends on this note of restored order and justice.